Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a quick spin through the biggest headlines in the sport. And this week, we take a look back at two more packed fight cards from Jacksonville as the UFC completed a hat-trick of events in a space of 8 days down there in Florida. There were talking points aplenty, so let's get straight into them with MMA Junkie's Farah Hanoun, plus MMA Junkie Radio's Gorgeous George and Goes. They're locked, loaded, and ready to go. So let's put them on the clock. Kicking things off this week, let's talk about fight stoppages, guys. The timing of the stoppages was a major talking point after both main events at UFC on ESPN Plus 29 and at UFC on ESPN 8 in Jacksonville. Just about everybody, including referee Jason Herzog, felt that Anthony Smith versus Glover Teixeira went on for too long, while Walt Harris looked very close to getting Alistair Overeem in big trouble early on, but referee Dan Mergliotta let that one carry on, and the Reem went on to score a big win. So I guess the question here is, just how tough is it for those guys to be the third man in the octagon when it comes to judging how to stop a fight? And do we need to cut these guys some slack when we see instances like the two main events we saw in Jacksonville this week? 3 minutes on the clock. George, kick us off.
They're human beings, and it's a tough job. But just like any official in any top sport, those are tough jobs as well. The NFL, geez, they have the beauty of instant replay, so does basketball and baseball for certain types of play, certain moments in the game. And they go back, they confer with the offices in New York or London or wherever, and they still come back and give you the wrong decision. And then the NFL, the MLB, or whoever has to come in and apologize and say, we goofed. It is difficult, folks. But guess what? These judges, these refs, they've earned their spot there. It's just everyone likes to pile on and say, oh my God, what are they doing there? We need new ones. No, we don't. They're good. They're really good. You have to trust them. Do they often make bad mistakes? No. Do they ever make mistakes? Yes, but not very often. Again, I can't stress that enough. Cut them some slack.
Is that the issue, Goes? They're kind of damned if they do and damned if they don't when it comes to stopping fights. It's either too early or it's too late. And because they tend to get them right most of the time, is it that reason that we always seem to pick out the mistakes? What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. If you look at it overall, the product, 12 fights a night, sometimes it could be even more. For the most part, they get it right. I think it's okay to cut them some slack from time to time, so long as there's accountability when they make a mistake. And that's something that we just saw this past week with Jason Herzog. There's accountability. I mean, you have to remember, for any other referee in any other sport, you can make up a call. If you screw up on first down, there's second down, third down, fourth down. In an 80-game season, you can make up a loss. In MMA, that can set you back for almost a year, sometimes 2 years. So the one thing I do want to point out, though, guys, is perhaps if these referees and judges got paid more, I think they're such an intricate part of what's going on that they deserve more money. I think that would really, really help. But for the most part, I think they get it right.
Yeah, Farah, it's such an important job, that the safety of the fighters is in their hands every time the fight starts, and it's such a responsible job for them. I mean, do we need to cut these guys a bit more slack and give them a bit more respect when it comes to their decision making, do you think?
Yeah, I do. I think it's an impossible position to be in. Like, you kind of have to react in the moment. If we look at the stoppage of the Dominic Cruz fight, he was just about on it was a lot of unanswered punches, and he was just making his way back up, and that's when the referee decided to stop it. So it's a tough spot for Keith Peterson. I mean, when he jumped in there, it was literally the same time that Cruz was making his way back up. You have to make a judgment in the moment, and you can't take it back. That's the problem. And you either let it go on for too long, and then you wonder, when do I jump in? I've let it go on for too long. If we look at Jason Herzog, it's like maybe he let it go on too long, but then he's probably thinking, like, when do I jump in? I let him survive for so long. Maybe he's still in it. It's just a tough spot to be in. It's hard to make that judgment. And I think, like they said, they get it right most of the times, but we tend to kind of focus on the times they don't, or in our opinions, they don't. But it's definitely a super difficult position to be in.
Got to be one of the toughest jobs in sports officiating, MMA referee. Moving on to the next topic of the show this week, we maybe didn't have the big high-profile title fights in the two most recent shows down there in Jacksonville, but there are plenty of important matchups to enjoy and a host of standout performances. So looking back on those two cards, guys, who gets your MVP award, or MVF, if you like, most valuable fighter from the last two shows? Who stood out to you? And let us know why. 3 minutes on the clock. Goes, over to you.
For this one, I think I'm going to go Glover Teixeira, guys. Really, in this pandemic, with what's going on, there's a lot of pressure on fighters to get things done. This is a guy that's been around for a very, very long time. So at his age, the performance he gave was incredible. And to be able to do that after coming back from even a little bit of adversity early on in that fight, things weren't going his way. Anthony Smith was actually looking pretty good, and they made the adjustments. He was able to come back and win the fight. And in a division where there's a big clog at the top, and we're saying the same names over and over, this is a guy who's generating a streak, and I think this could be a really good thing for him. Hopefully, he'll be able to compound that with a little momentum, maybe one more, and he's right back in that title picture. But side note, I want to also shout out John Anik. What a terrific job doing all those cards in this era.
That's a great shout, actually. John Anik, little nod to the play-by-play man who had to do a lot of prep in a very short space of time. Farah, who's your MVP from this past week in the UFC?
I'm going to go Drew Dober. I think he kind of showed that he's a player in this lightweight division. He's always been super underrated, and he had that fight with Beneil Dariush where he was doing so well, but he ended up getting submitted. But then after that, he knocks out Nasrat Haqparast, who was a highly touted prospect, and then he goes and stops Alexander Hernandez. I just think he's looked phenomenal. He's got heavy hands. He's very well-rounded. The Elevation Fight team are on fire. He spars Justin Gaethje. He's not short of phenomenal training partners over there, and I think he's looked great. He's a veteran as well. He's very experienced, so I feel like he's gone through the trials and tribulations, and I think he's ready to make a run in the lightweight division.
Yeah, and he's one of the politest men you could possibly meet in the sport of mixed martial arts. Check out any of our past interviews with the Doberman. Very, very nice guy, and good things are coming his way. Gorgeous. George, who's your MVP for the past week? Who you got?
My answer is so spot on that I can be concise and just give you the name, except I'm going to get to it in just a second, and I'm going to waste 5 seconds wishing Farah Hanoun a happy birthday, our colleague over at MMA Junkie. Now, back to Kevin Holland, Big Mouth. This is what he likes to do. He likes to talk to his opponent and use his big mouth. It kind of cost him over at Dana White Contender Series, but since then, he's righted the ship, and he is moving along nicely, all while weighing, what did he say, 188 during his camp and 182 at weigh-ins. He's got a possible future at welterweight. But look, Fluffy Hernandez, man, I like that guy. He's got some of the nicest hands, some really, really crisp boxing, and I wanted to see more of that fight play out. But Kevin Holland went out, did what he did. I've been kind of impressed with this guy. I think if he can just shore up a few things, tighten his game up, I think he could be a player, maybe even at both divisions.
Yeah, and he's called out a fight with Mickey Gall, which I think might be an interesting test for him when if he does end up going down to 170. He wants that one pretty quick, so keep your eyes open for that one. Moving on to the next topic, the two events that we had this week concluded the UFC's first full week back from the coronavirus lockdown. The sporting world was watching to see how they fared, and after a bit of a bumpy start with Jacare Souza's failed COVID test before UFC 249, the next two shows appeared to go off pretty much without a hitch. Dana White hailed the UFC's return as, quote, successful in every way. Do you guys agree with that? What was your big assessment of how the UFC fared in their Jacksonville triple header? 3 minutes on the clock once again. Farah, it's your birthday to kick us off.
I'd say it was pretty. I mean, it's hard to say it went perfectly just because of that Jacare Souza's failed drug test, especially that he had mentioned before that he was around a family member, I believe, that had COVID-19. So maybe in that regard, it's hard to say that it went 100% perfectly. But I think in terms of testing and all the health and safety measures that they went through, I think we have to commend them for that. They really stressed on that. The pressure was on the UFC because they were getting a lot of public criticism as well. And I do think they did a great job. Now, they do say it takes a while for these results or for COVID to appear sometimes. So, hopefully everybody's fine. I mean, they've been tested numerous times, so it appears that everybody's fine. But I just think overall, I think we should commend them for the health and safety procedures that they went through. And yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say 100% successful just because of maybe that one blemish with Jacare Souza's failed drug test. But overall, I think they've done a lot of things well, and they're going to learn from there. And other sports, I think, are going to be taking pointers from Dana White and the UFC moving forward.
Absolutely. And George, I don't think enough has been said about the fact that the UFC were the first ones back. So that means that the amount of pressure on them is immense. To have come through this week relatively unscathed, that's a big win for the UFC, right?
Yeah, no doubt. And Farah's right. That's one of the things. If I'm giving them a grade, like if there's the A+ exists, then I'd give him an A. If it's just an A, I'd give him an A-. That was the one thing I think they could have handled better, because he was so upfront before he even got to his weight cut and anything else. It was when he presented himself that at that point, at least according to what I've read with CDC, that person being exposed has to enter a 14-day quarantine. Another thing, look, I really think it was successful. Let me just say that. I think the UFC did great. They were successful. I think with any type of situation, you're just going to have, these types of slight fumbles or whatever. I didn't like the fist bumps at the weigh-ins. I just thought, you don't need it. Just be there if you need to, because you want to keep the fighter separate, but why do that? And then there was a few times where you just catch people without their mask. But look, I can't imagine what it must be like 24/7 to wear a mask. So I cut them a little slack there.
Yeah, and Goes, you got about 40 seconds to give us your take, but drop in and let us know how do you think it went?
I think it went fairly well. I mean, the big thing for me was knowing whether or not we're going to get a true representation of the fighters. And the UFC did everything in their power to make them feel relaxed and make them feel safe. So overall, I think it was a success. Props to the UFC, because a lot of people kept talking about this as it being like a trial run for what things are going to look like. And the UFC never took it that way. They actually went in and really only had to make a few minor tweaks here and there. But it's because they were so well prepared. So props to them.
Yeah, good stuff. One fight that bubbled up to the surface this week, guys, it's come as a slight surprise, I think. The possible matchup at heavyweight between Francis Ngannou and UFC light heavyweight champion Jon Jones. The pair have been talking back and forth on social media this week. Jones has been belittling Ngannou's technique, while Ngannou has made no secret of his willingness to happily welcome Jon Jones to the UFC heavyweight division. It's a fight that's gotten everybody excited, and given the fact that the title's tied up with the trilogy fight between Stipe Miocic and Daniel Cormier right now, is Jones versus Ngannou now the fight to make at heavyweight? We've got 3 minutes on the clock. George, what do you reckon?
Yeah, let me tell you something, man. When I see two big names like that I was not expecting to hear, chirp at each other on social media, I get pretty excited. That one hit me out of nowhere. That said, I like the way things are happening here, where combat sports is coming back, and it looks like mainstream sports has a bit of a future, or at least they're talking about it. Save this one for the stadium over there, across from the Mandalay Bay. Let this one simmer a little bit. I love Mike Tyson's advice to Ngannou. Let everybody know, man, you're one of the most terrifying people on the planet. Build this thing up and get paid, the two of you. But Jon Jones has plenty of opponents, all right? He's got Blachowicz. He's got the rematches versus Santos or Reyes, maybe even Israel Adesanya. Who knows? Maybe even Daniel Cormier. Could you guys believe that? I can't believe I said it, but Cormier's retired, or given that retirement date a few times now. Ngannou, we know the situation at heavyweight. We've addressed it on previous spinning back clicks. So now let that one simmer. I'm excited about it, but we don't need it right now.
Goes, as you say, as George just said, Jones is a man with plenty of options, but do any of them excite him? That's the big question. And is Francis Ngannou the guy to really get those juices flowing for him again?
I mean, as a fan, I would say I would be absolutely stoked to see that at the top of being the top billing for a big pay-per-view card. But realistically, I don't really like this fight. I don't think it makes much sense for Francis Ngannou to take this fight. It makes all the sense for Jon Jones. But if you're Francis Ngannou, you're the bigger guy. And this is a division where the weight doesn't jump, 5-10 pounds. It jumps drastically. So if you're Francis Ngannou, you're supposed to beat up Jon Jones. Not only are you supposed to beat him up, you're probably supposed to beat him up pretty bad. And if for some reason that doesn't happen, that's not a good look for you. In fact, you could probably even win that fight. But if it's a grind out type of fight, it's probably still not a good look for you. If you lose, then that mystique behind being that big heavyweight and offering something to the heavyweight champion once they become available, that sort of goes away. And I wouldn't take that risk if I'm Francis Ngannou.
Yeah, Farah, 45 seconds left. What do you reckon? Is this a viable fight, or is this one to put on the back burner for a little bit later on, do you think?
I mean, as a fan, I'd definitely watch it, but my actual biggest problem with it is Jon Jones. I think if you were to move up to heavyweight, I think he'd deserve a title shot right off the bat. I mean, we've seen people move up a weight and get title shots when they haven't even really defended their title. So if there's anybody that deserves a straight title shot, it would be John Jones. So I think it would be risky for him too. I mean, he's dabbled about the idea of moving up to heavyweight and to fight a guy like Ngannou. I know stylistically he sees it as a fight that he could win, but I just think that if Jones is going to move up to heavyweight, he should fight for the title. And for Ngannou, he's just frustrated. He wants to fight, and he knows he's going to be waiting for a while before DC and Stipe complete their trilogy. So I think for him, that's why he's jumping all over it. Might not make the most sense, especially during the pandemic and stuff. I agree with that point. It'd be a big fight. But if Jones was to move up to heavyweight, I think if anyone deserves to move up a weight class and get a straight title shot, it's John Jones.
I'll let you get away with that one, Farah, because you went a little bit over, but it is your birthday, as we've mentioned. And finally, the UFC announced that Kevin Randleman, the legend Kevin Randleman, will be the latest inductee into the Pioneer Wing of the UFC's Hall of Fame. It was announced during the event this past week. Very emotional scenes. Mark the Hammer Coleman was there in floods of tears. What are your favorite memories of Kevin Randleman's stellar MMA career, guys? And what impact has he left on the sport that has meant that he is a deserving inductee into the UFC's Hall of Fame? 3 minutes on the clock. Goes, take us away.
Well, the way the UFC has made their Hall of Fame, if you look at everybody that's come before Kevin Randleman, this is on par with that. This makes sense at that point. It's a guy who's fought in the UFC and in Pride, and at that time they were the big two. So he's left us with a lot of big memories. I mean, you think about that big slam. I mean, the dude has just been able to compete against some of the best guys in two different eras. He's the monster for a reason. But Kevin Randleman, I mean, it sucks that he's not here to accept that. You know, he was such a big part of MMA early on, and to me, it just really hurts to not see the guy up there and receiving an award that he absolutely deserves, especially being among some of the guys that helped build the sport. Kevin Randleman's given us a lot of great memories, and I'm happy he gets to go in. Yeah,
he's one of the true pioneers and one of the godfathers of ground and pound. Farah, what are your memories of seeing Kevin Randleman destroying people inside the ring and inside the octagon?
Yeah, it's got to be the upset over Mirko Cro Cop. I mean, he was such a massive underdog, so it was such a huge moment for his career. And also, he kind of ticked all the boxes. He could talk. He had the physique. He looked good. He had the fighting style. He was just so explosive. Win or lose, he always gave us an entertaining fight. He's fought the who's who in MMA, standout wrestler as well. So he came in with that background, and I just think he kind of like ticked all the boxes. And he's had a great career. He reached the pinnacle of the sport. He won the UFC heavyweight title as well. So the Sam of Fedor as well is one of the memorable moments I think of him. But for me, the upset over Mirko Cro Cop for sure, I'd say was the biggest moment for him.
Some legendary commentary from Mauro Ranallo when that finish happened, going absolutely berserk on the microphone. George, bring this one home for us. Kevin Randleman, absolute legend of the sport. What are your memories, sir?
You know, I wish we would have been out of time because these two summed it up perfectly. They covered everything, the UFC title, the epic slam, the upset of Mirko Cro Cop. But let me tell you something. If you look at our YouTube page, youtube.com/MMA Junkie video, one of the things that really enthralled our viewers years ago was this workout of Yoel Romero and how athletic he was. That's what Kevin Randleman was. That guy was like, what, 5'9", I believe? And I swear he could probably win an NBA dunk contest. I mean, he was athletically gifted, and yes, he had the gift of gab, so he backed it up because he had that bravado. And taking the torch from Mark Coleman, you know, and putting Ohio State on the MMA map. That was one of the original schools. I know Missouri and Oklahoma State and Arizona State, they get some love, but OSU's put out some really, really good fighters. Just that's on Lance Palmer. So that's definitely, you know, I wish it would have happened 4 years ago, but he's going in. He deserves his spot. He defended his title as well in the UFC, so cannot say enough about the monster.
Yeah, great moment for his family and a great athlete in the history of the sport of mixed martial arts. That's all we have time for right now on Spinning Back Clique this week. Huge thank you to Farah, to Gorgeous George, to Goes, to Kenny Hathaway, who's been running the show from behind the scenes. And thanks to you two for watching. Keep it locked to MMA Junkie for our continued coverage. We'll be back in the mix with another edition of Spinning Back Clique next week.